now.
Oh, God. I'm just finishing my warm-up routine. You might as well see the end of it. A guy walks into A&E and he says to the nurse, "Do you know I was here 3 months ago?" And she said, "You have to wait your turn, I think, bring us." Right. Okay. Right. Okay, well, good evening and welcome to the King's Fund and to another in the series of our health chats. Tonight we have a specially selected audience. They're chosen because they're rich and wealthy and good-looking. Unfortunately, a lot of them couldn't make it. But and we've got our very special guest tonight who has a title that is so long that it would take me an hour and a half to explain it. I've never seen so much bullshit in a title in my life. But let's meet the man with the title, ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Swindells. If you don't mind, we'll get on to the... What are your socks like? Let's have a look. Oh, no,
they're very functional. They cover both feet.
The sponsors. No, I'm not going to mention the sponsors.
No, because otherwise I'd have to declare it. It gets messy.
Fine, okay, fine. Come on.
Yeah.
Don't want to do it now. Listen, I'm in deep trouble for some reason, because I've been put off by the back row. I forgot to mention our sponsors, which is a very stupid thing to do, and which means this is probably the last health chat we're going to do. And here they are. It's the fabulous IMS Maxims, who are just fabulous, completely. And we're going to hear a brief word from Michael.
Come on, Michael.
I don't want you to think this is under-rehearsed tonight. Go on. I'm a victim of night nurse. Go on, off you go.
Well, he can spoil anything, can't he? It's a pleasure to see you all again. Thank you. We're delighted to be able to welcome Matthew, who I've had the pleasure of meeting on several paths through the complexity of the NHS and implementation of big systems, and it's been quite a journey, really, hasn't it? One way or another. I really look forward to hearing what he's got to say about navigating through these particularly complex times, so it should be great fun. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Michael. Big round of applause. I thought you recovered from that cock-up very well, Michael.
It's not usually that nice to me. I'm a bit nervous.
Anyway, my apologies for that. Anyway, right, well, listen, so you're a Brighton boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
And your dad worked for a local authority.
He did. He worked for Brighton Council as head of building maintenance before he retired.
Yeah.
But at heart, I'm still an Everton supporter. So
really?
First generation, not Scouser.
So when you so you went from, where did you go to uni?
I went to university in Hull and then did my MBA at Brunel.
Oh, in Brunel. That's interesting. Yeah. And what did you study?
Economics. Although I wouldn't call myself an economist, I would call myself someone who did a degree in economics a very long time ago.
Yeah. Because I can't quite work out what it is you are, whether you're a sort of IT person or you're an organisational development person or whether you're a change person. I mean, what do you see yourself as?
I see myself as someone who manages complex stuff. So really, I think I grew up as a hospital manager in the NHS.
Did you go on the leadership thing, the management?
I came in as a management trainee. I came in as a graduate supplies management trainee in the Northwest.
Supplies
management trainee back in the glory days.
Supplies. You're sitting here with the man who used to be the chairman of the National Standing Committee on Supplies and Purchasing.
Well, we could do an hour on that.
I know. I think I had a budget of about, I don't know, £3.50 or something in those days, and it was a complete mess when I ran it. And I'm pleased to say it's a complete mess now, isn't it? Not much has changed. We'll do the supplies and purchasing. There was a bloke there, a knighted who ran it. I think he's dead now, so we can slag him off, but it was just absolutely hopeless. Supplies, now this has got me going now, supplies. Suddenly this has become really interesting. Supplies, now were you one of the planted people? Did you work for the Supplies Authority? Because they used to put people, used to implant or did you work for the Trust?
I worked for the Northwest Regional Supplies
Agency. You see, we're talking about the real NHS, Northwest Regional. How many of you here remember, put your hand up if you're in Northwest Regional. That's right. When you ask people of that age to put their hand up, they need a nurse to help them. Yes. Northwest Region.
I was embedded at Blackburn Hospital and I lived in nurse accommodation in Burnley.
Yeah, and you were embedded, because they did this embedding thing where they used to put like behind the line spies, didn't they? They were hated. They used to piss in their coffee cups and stuff like that. We never used to tell them. They had a terrible, honestly, they had a terrible time. Yeah.
We had I had a fabulous time doing that.
Yeah.
Well,
And what was the price of a bog roll in those days?
Free.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's because we never knew how many of them we got, so they were just free.
I was with Patrick Carter the other day, and he was talking about, because we call him Lord Bog Roll, which he's a good sport, he doesn't seem to mind, but he's never said he minds anyway, so we've got this
He's probably copyrighted it every time you use it now.
We've got this thing about the new model hospital now, isn't it?
Yes.
And I have to say that I was reading some stuff that you'd written about it, and you weren't desperately enthusiastic, I would have thought, about the Carter report.
I'm always desperately enthusiastic about everything that Patrick does. I'm a particular fan of the previous Carter report, which said that we should only have 10 pathology departments across the country.
That's true. And how many have we got now?
Same number as we had when he wrote it, I think. Give or take one or two. So, but there is, Patrick puts his finger frequently on uncomfortable truths for us, and then the challenge for the NHS is, do we pick it up and do anything with it? And I think we may come back to this as a subject on in our conversation about what are the really hard decisions. Is it making changes of stuff that's been around for a really long time, or is it cutting services because you can just turn that off? And I think we duck the hard decisions too often.
Well, I mean, just to stick with Patrick for a moment, because because of your obvious interest in supplies, it does strike me that there is kind of a contradiction, isn't there? Simon, on the one hand, is trying to run an organisation where 1,000 flowers bloom and people be innovative and do their thing, and Patrick is trying to run this sort of Stalinist new model hospital thing where we've all got to phone in with the price of a bog roll every day. Discuss,
yeah. I think, Simon's moved slightly beyond the 1,000 flowers to there are a number
2,000 flowers.
There are a number of flowers which might grow in this environment. It'd be really nice if you chose to grow one of those rather than one of the ones that dies every year. So there is a bit of, I think, coming together on that. But I think there is an inherent tension within the NHS between independent organisations that have been set up with boards to make their own decisions and get on with stuff, and a nationally accountable, nationally funded, taxpayer-funded organisation where we have to take the advantage of being a national organisation and drive out the efficiencies that are possible with that. And when those two things come together, that you get into it, you do get this tension about you shouldn't be telling me what to do, well, if you did it better, I wouldn't have to.
I think that's, you put your finger on what the nub of the issue is at the moment, because I get an increasing feeling now that people actually would quite like a bit more direction, but would quite like a bit more central direction. And if you look at the STPs, which I know is it will probably be the bête noire of your fine career, but STPs are really putting back, aren't they, the strategic role. Although we don't, you sit on the naughty step if you call them strategic health authorities, but they really are strategic health authorities.
I think what they differ as is that they look more like membership organisations, as in people are coming in for them to be able to make decisions and be able to do difficult stuff. People have to voluntarily share some of the accountability that lies in their organisation because we don't have a statutory framework to instruct them to do it. I think there are some advantages in that. The NHS has done lots of structural reorganisations over the years, and just changing the structure doesn't change the behaviours. This has created the degree of difficulty is harder to pull it off with the STPs, but if you do manage to create those relationships, you've got a fighting chance. But you are right, when we sit down with them, or when we sit down with the ACS elite group, part of what's coming out is much more a sense of them asking each other, tell us what you've done that's worked so we can copy it. And this has been your passion for a generation, is our ability to spread has been pitiful. Our ability to innovate is high, our ability to spread has been pitiful. And I felt over the last 12 months that I've been back in the NHS, over that time, the sense of these are really hard questions and we're going to need to work together, and the coming back together of a collaborative culture is re-emerging.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we look back on it, I suppose, with mixed views, but there was a time, when the regional health authorities, who were the strategic arm at that time, I mean, you didn't mess with the regional health authorities, you certainly didn't mess with the regional chairman, and you know, you got on and did stuff, and that was really quite a handy link, I think, between what was going on at the front line and what was going on, what was happening in Whitehall. I mean, the Secretary of State would frequently get a message through the strategic health, or the regional health authorities they were in those days, and stuff got done. Now I'm kind of confused with. I mean, I'm a great enthusiast for innovation and change, but I'm not clear when all this is finished, what will it look like?
So I think there is a truth that the conduit from central thinking, locally making it relevant, very locally implementation, has broken a bit, and we're trying to create that back, bring that back in, and the STPs are part of that.
Is there are you sort of kind of nervous of doing that? Do you feel that there is a resistance from mainly the trust, isn't it really, that they don't want that sense of central direction, or I mean, I just don't know why. We just don't get a grip of it and say, go and do this, for God's sake.
So I think we have a responsibility to know what we want people to do, because it's really easy to hail back to some halcyon days when it was all run top down, it was really clear. And I came into the NHS in those days when we had pre-foundation trusts, when it was really exciting to become an acute trust, and the quality of the service delivered there was much poorer than it is now. So I wouldn't want to go back to the days when you could say we had accountable care organisations, we called them health authorities, and health authorities let waiting lists run up to 2 years and stopped operating.
I don't think that's true. I mean, I used to be the chairman of a district health authority, and I'm outraged at this foul calumny that you pronounced upon my glittering career.
Where were you?
Well, I'm not going to tell you, but we did have quite a long waiting list.
Quite a long waiting list. And your A&E departments flowed like a smoothly oiled machine.
I can tell you they were very popular places.
Yes.
Always full.
Everybody wanted to be there.
They were always full. I mean, we must have been doing it right. They were always full.
And so I think we do no credit to the NHS today to pretend that at some point 25 years ago, when it was all top down and there was a big beast sitting in a regional office issuing instructions, it ran well, because actually
it did.
Really
no,
bad
but I am absolutely not going to let you get away with that, because I mean I cast my mind back to when I was the chairman of a health authority, and financial controls were presented to us at that time on one side a piece of A3, a graph paper, because it was before Microsoft. You know, don't laugh. It was before. There is life before Microsoft. It was before Microsoft, and they used to Roneo them out. You know, the copy. Do you remember the smell of that fantastic smell? It's where I first started my addiction problems. Yeah, and you know, we just didn't have the tools then to do it properly. And if I was to say, do you know what? If we had the structures that we had then, now, with the technologies that we've got now, I think a lot of things would be very different. I mean, our annual allocations model was to take the amount that we knew that we'd get through the whole year and divide it by 12, because we couldn't do it in any other way. Now we can.
I will allow you to have that little fantasy past where we were doing the best we possibly could under those difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
Which
So when you go back to, so where were you then?
Let's
go back to your time. So where were you then when we were doing? You weren't doing regional health authorities.
No. So my first hospital job was at Guy's and St Thomas's.
Yeah.
And
what did you do there?
Mid-90s. I was the IT director at the time the two hospitals merged, and then I was the general manager for women and children's services.
So how did you go into IT? Because, I mean, you know, you're not an IT person, you know.
I got an A in O-level.
C:\\\. Yeah, that was our induction, wasn't it?
So,
yeah. But I mean, that tells you, doesn't it, the mess we were in. I mean, when we first got a computer, when I was running a trust by then, and we had a computer in the trust, and we all used to stand around it and say, "Buy it, that's a wonderful thing. What should we do with it?" You know?
My first job as chief operating officer, my chief executive used to use the screen for sticking post-it notes on.
Yeah.
So
you said that in a speech here the other day, rather unkindly, I thought. You spoke of it was a woman, wasn't it? It was the district general manager.
Yes, we'll not rename her live on the internet.
No.
But there's...
You can look it up, it's on the internet. I found it earlier today. Yeah.
So at that time, so I made the move
from
IT.
how did you bullshit your way to a job in IT?
they thought that what they needed was somebody who knew how to buy computers. You know, so they wanted a project manager for IT,
Yeah.
and that the most important thing was that you knew how to manage suppliers. Now, clearly that is a helpful, but it's not
been a procurement.
it's not the only thing. So, but that was a long time ago, and I went from
So this entire career of yours has been based
we
on
built on there's no one else to do it. Is Matthew will do it.
on
You
the
know,
basis you can buy computers.
Yeah.
Right, okay, that explains a lot. Right, okay.
which is why we're doing it so terribly well now.
Yes, yes. Or Dell, you just send a check to Dell, don't you? We seem to be incapable of buying anything other than with Dell written on
Wouldn't know, not I haven't used a Dell computer.
it. Okay, right. So then you bullshitted your way into a job in IT. How long did that last?
So I did that for I don't know, 3 or 4 years. I went in as project manager at St Thomas's, and then when Guys and St Thomas's
So did
merged,
you sort of make? Did you make guys? Did you IT enable them?
I put the first Ethernet network into the NHS and the first email system into the NHS, and I merged the Guys and St Thomas's PAS systems onto a single PAS system.
So that
and
was
the first
during
management information. So back in the case, for the really old people here, the Daisy case mix management system, I put the case mix management system into Guys Thomas's, and I thought this IT stuff's interesting, but really where the action is running hospitals, and so I took a pay cut to move sideways to go and run the Women and Children's Services when a vacancy came up in.
Where was that?
At Guys and St Thomas's.
Yeah.
And I spent a long time doing that, learning how hospitals ran, and I went from being that to be chief operating officer in a hospital, and then on to be chief executive.
Which hospital was that?
Edward and Wrexham.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? What's happened to that now?
I know, because we won HSJ Trust of the Year when I was there.
Did you really? Yeah.
Yes.
And it went downhill horribly.
As soon as I left.
Yeah. I don't know why I let him say that. No, because that's sort of a bit near my bailiwick, really. You had a horrible estate there, didn't you?
It's a horrible state, split over 2 sites, fantastically dedicated staff there, and a really challenging health mix, because you've got the Slough population, which is basically a bit of inner London that's accidentally in Berkshire, and so you're dealing with high levels of coronary heart disease, high levels of diabetes, mortality, so a lot of people who don't have English as their first language, and so at that time, delivering that hospital there, and then drove 10 miles down the road and you found the bit of the hospital that was in Ascot.
Yeah.
Some of my...
and the local MP there was an registrar, I think, there, wasn't he, at the hospital?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was. And they were, for some strange reason, they're near Dorney Wood, which is where the Olympic rowing took place. And I was involved in some of the preparatory work for press and PR for the NHS around the Olympics. I remember going down to Heatherman's and saying, please God, don't let there be anything go wrong because we just simply cannot bring people here. It was horrendous.
Well, I had a wonderful moment there where one of the newspapers rang up and said, we hear you've got General Pinochet in your hospital. And I said, I can absolutely guarantee that we don't. If we did, I would know. And about 20 minutes later, one of the radiologists went in and went, you need to know we've got General Pinochet. Absolute finger on the pulse.
Because he was banged up in Wentworth, wasn't he?
Yeah.
At the house in the golf club just up the road. Yeah, big mates of Mrs. T. Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, actually, I mean, that hospital has come on leaps and bounds since Andrew Morris at Frimley Park has taken over.
Because it's although it has difficult population and difficult facilities, it's got a tremendously committed staff there, and what it needs is good leadership. And the chief executive that I work for was a fabulous leader. We delivered brilliant staff. It ran into some bumpy times around the time it became a foundation trust. I think they stretched too far to make FT status.
It was the old story. They had to balance their books when they couldn't balance their books.
It was, and I think they made some promises that they couldn't deliver and got themselves into trouble. But the core of that staff can deliver a good hospital. And bringing in a great leader like Andrew Morris and bringing some of his people onto the site, I think everyone went, oh, management's turned up again, and they've done good stuff.
No, Andrew's done very well. He's not been very well lately.
He's not been well.
Yeah, is he back at work? I think he is.
I think he is.
Yeah. If he's watching, come back, we need you.
if he's watching, stop watching, go do something else.
Yeah. Go run, go pop in and make pay.
He won't be watching because he'll be standing in the A&E department.
Yeah, he
directing
will.
traffic.
Yeah, and he's a terrific guy. Of course, he was recruited by a very bright, charming, erudite, with it.
You really have been around a long time.
Chairman and chief chairman. Yeah, I remember. He was. I was on the board that appointed him, and he was. I mean, I don't know if you all know Andrew. I mean, he's a stout party now, but he was a callow youth when he turned up, and he offered us great prospects of a whole new start, and he's done fabulously well. Yeah. Anyway, so we digress. So so then you left there, and then you went to. Then you ran your own place, did you?
So I went to the Royal Surrey.
Yeah.
I was chief executive there.
Now that's another interesting place. There's like a bomb site, and you've got that Grade 2 listed building front, haven't you? Oh no, I'm
No, that's Wexham.
I'm thinking, yeah.
Wexham in the town.
Yeah, Royal Surrey.
Royal Surrey, isn't it?
Is the one with the ludicrous car park, isn't it?
Horses have ludicrous car parks.
Yeah.
Yes, it may well be.
Yeah.
I had a bad experience there. But it had the advantage of being, it had a lot of advantages. It's a fabulous hospital. When I went there, it was struggling, but all of the pieces are in place there for it to be, as it is now, I think, one of the best hospitals in the country. It's got sensational clinical staff. They can recruit people who want to live there. It runs off a single site. They can fundraise money. When I turned up as chief executive there, 3 different doctors had raised each £1 million to invest in clinical services and were waiting for a chief executive to turn up to give them permission to go and build stuff. So I look like a genius. 3 weeks after I'm there, and there's builders on site building a new diabetes unit, a new cardiac unit, and refurbishing paediatrics. Because the clinicians were very engaged in that and in the community. And it delivers. It's a really good hospital. Delivers sensational outcomes.
And was one of the first minimally invasive surgery training units?
It was. Yeah.
Virginia Bottomley, I think, put that in.
Possibly, possibly. But the Matthew unit was yes.
We went through a period where there were a lot of accidents with minimally invasive surgery, and I mean, clearly, the solution was better training.
Every Sunday afternoon, I'd get a phone call from the golf course from the surgeon to say, I'm going to have to cancel the training operations that I'm doing on Monday morning, and I've got people dialing in from all around the world because there's no bed for the patient if we need it. I say, you need to discharge somebody. Like, okay, I'll do that then. Yeah. Go have an empty bedroom so he can bring his patient in.
It is a good hospital, that's for sure. And so, so you had a good time there. You did well there. And what happened then?
My past got caught up with me, and I got dragged out to go and be special advisor to Patricia Hewitt, when she was Secretary of State.
I thought Patricia Hewitt was a very interesting period in the health service. I mean, she wasn't popular. She ran into all kinds of problems. She wasn't a person I thought you could warm to, really. She ran into the Herceptin problem. She got bushwhacked at, I think it was the Royal College of Nursing conference, when she over Herceptin. But more importantly, she had a management consultancy background, and she did this unique thing of saying to the NHS, you have to balance the books. And we all said, what? How'd you do that? But she was draconian about it. I suppose that now we're going to find out it was your idea.
No, I was just carrying it back. No, it was an interesting time, because in some ways that was the high point of the NHS around a lot of things. We almost eliminated waiting around that time. I'd say the real high point was that was when we passed the smoking legislation.
Yes.
So what will be my epitaph was I helped steer through the smoking legislation, and there are people walking around today who will be dead if they haven't passed it.
And it was a brave political decision by Tony Blair.
Yeah. I think there were other people who were very brave over it. Tony took a bit of convincing, because he was for freedom or people's free will. People need to make grown-up decisions for themselves. You've got John Reid, the former Health Secretary, saying that this is imposing a burden on working-class people. They should have the right to smoke if they want to. So it took a bit of...
like poor people don't have any brains.
Yeah. So it took a bit of steering through the cabinet, but taking that through, and it was a free vote, if you remember. So it took a while to be sure that Tony was going to get up and support it, as opposed to abstain. But and then we thought, You remember we introduced it in the summer because there was worry there would be civil disobedience, and if people couldn't stand outside pubs because it was pissing out with rain, that they may just ignore. I think in Spain the first time.
Now that's strategic thinking for me. There's a lesson there, isn't there?
Yeah. So it came in and now the idea with rollback is just you couldn't imagine sitting in a restaurant and people smoking next to you.
Yeah, there are people now who ban it in the street. I mean, it's disgusting doing it anywhere. But we came off the back of the renegotiation of all the NHS contracts, which put a bit of inflation into the NHS, which created a set of financial problems. So despite the fact that there was an enormous amount of money coming in, the NHS was also chasing down waiting lists, abolishing waiting in A&E, expanding capacity, paying the staff more. We suddenly found that we were spending more money than the NHS was being allocated. And I mean, the other Well,
person
it was a halcyon period, but I mean, and then later, of course, Andy Burnham, I remember him saying in Parliament, we have no waiting lists anymore, which wasn't quite true, but it was all but near as damn true, wasn't it? But do you think there was a huge amount of investment that went in to get us back to the European average? That was the target, wasn't it? Do you think that money was really? Did we kind of fritter that away? Really, we could have invested it more.
I think that it wasn't all spent as well as we would have liked it to have been. Looking back, and I think one of the interesting questions when you look at the pressures that A&Es are under now, the ones who are coping are the ones who took that opportunity to actually fundamentally reform the way they ran their services, and you could see those. It's hard for everybody, but you were down at SASH where my mate Michael Wilson's the chief executive, was my chief operating officer at Royal Surrey. That hospital, it has the odd bad day, but basically they fixed their operating processes. The ones who took that opportunity and just opened more beds, when the money ran out, ended up in terrible trouble. So there is a piece of reform which it got embedded in some places, but not everywhere.
I mean, I think it's easy to look at the past through the lens of today and assume that we knew then what we know now. And I don't think we did. We didn't know about flow through A&E then. I mean, really, that's only become...
No, we did. We did at that time. That time with the money. Yeah, yes. We did. Because
what date was that?
That would have been between 2000 and 2005. So I was chief executive.
Oh well, I suppose a bit later on we would have done.
But that was the point at which we were really getting rid of the 408. And at that point, some of the work that the modernisation agency had done had been embedded, but the concept of flow. I mean, I remember when we turned around the A&E at the Royal Surrey, which when I went there was the worst A&E in the country. There were two big things that happened. One was we made the situation in A&E everybody's problem, so you could see from every ward on every PC on every ward what the state in A&E was. And the other was the conversation with the ward managers to say, if we're going to run this hospital at 90% bed occupancy, there needs to be on average 3 empty beds on your wards. And that's a kind of mind-blowing thing, because if your hospital's under pressure, the only real reasonable thing to do is to fill your hospital up and make sure every bed is. So no. To make flow work, we need to get to 90%, and that means when you look across your ward, most of the time there should be 3 empty beds. That's a really strange message to try and get out to people. And once we started to treat, if you've got fewer than 3 empty beds, we need to start treating this as a problem and reviewing what's going on.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It basically moved the debate forward by several hours, and flow started to happen.
And since then, of course, I mean, jumping forward a bit, I mean, now we've got ESIS who've done fantastic work, really, and the Academy, we've promoted a lot of their work, and now we've got, pajama paralysis, and we've got red and green days, and all that. It's a very sexy topic now, but it wasn't sexy, I don't think. It went far back as 2008. Anyway, so you were making a big success in 2005. 2008, was that? How long were you with Pat Hewitt?
So I went to work for Patricia in 2005, straight after the general election, 2005.
How did you get that job? Did she spot you?
I got a phone call.
Do you have a Labour background? You know?
Yeah.
You do? Like, were you councillor or?
No. I've just been involved in speech and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I got asked to come in.
Who have you written speeches for?
I wrote speeches for Chris Smith in the run up to the 97 election when he was Labour Health spokesman.
Yeah, I remember doing the Today programme with him once.
So she saw me, she didn't know me at all, she saw somebody else, There's a lot of faffing around. Some people wanted me, some people didn't, wanted the other guy. It was a bit of a debate. Several weeks passed.
Well, it's a big decision. It's a confidant thing.
Yeah.
And for you, it's a big decision. I mean, that's, I imagine, how you met Simon, was it, at that time?
No, Simon was general manager for surgery at Garth and St Thomas.
Oh, I see. You met him
general manager
there.
for women and children.
Yeah.
So I'd known Simon for a long time.
Yeah.
But Simon had gone by then. Simon was in the States by then.
Mm.
And so yeah, it was. And I was loving running the Royal Surrey as well. I was kind of, my plan was, I'll do this for another 3 years. I'll get to foundation status, then I'll go and run a teaching hospital. That was my career trajectory. And I was having a very good time. So it was a wrench, and I felt bad about going. Everyone's going, no, go do it, Matthew. It'd be nice to have somebody who's actually run a hospital kind of give you advice and stuff. So I did it, and it was really interesting. I was a secondment from the NHS, so there was a bunch of the politics that I didn't do. I didn't get a parliamentary Labour Party, I didn't get a Labour conferences and stuff like that. So I was slightly constrained in that I was effectively seconded into the civil service, but I was doing policy advice, and then there were 2 political advisors as well.
Yeah. And how willing was she to accept advice?
Oh, really, very, very willing to accept advice and very keen to have a debate. I remember when I turned up, I said, none of this makes any sense, Matthew. I can't work out what the plan is. And on my kitchen table one weekend, getting out a piece of wallpaper, unrolling a wallpaper, and drawing the flow of the NHS and bringing it in, and it being on our office wall in the SPAD office for 2 years. Kind of, this is where GPs fit, this is hospital, this is how payment by results works, this is how inspection works, this is kind of the route map for it, so that she'd stand in front of it and go, yeah, but this bit obviously doesn't work, does it? And go, yeah, that bit doesn't work. Okay, what are we going to do about that?
And how long were you there for?
2 years till Tony stepped down. So 2 and a bit years.
No, so you weren't in Gordon Brown's time?
No.
And what did you do after that?
So I then went and spent. It was about the same time that Richard Granger stepped down from being CIO. David Nicholson said to me, I don't know anybody else who knows anything about IT, can you come and put a hand on this while we work out what to do with the national programme? So I spent a year as David Nick's Chief of Staff and CIO.
Do you think Richard Granger was more sinned against than sinning?
I think Richard had some enormous talents. He was also very driven and very passionate about the NHS, but he had been the guy who put in place congestion charging in London. Fantastically successful. People came from all over the world to see how.
Which
see how that had
unfortunately
been
was
done.
a huge success.
Huge success, but it's an engineering project.
Yeah.
Kind of, you didn't have to engage the drivers emotionally in the idea that they were having photographs taken.
I can promise you did engage them.
Yeah, you didn't have to because there was. So the piece which said this is actually about aligning technology with a set of changes, as opposed to this is about just delivering technology. And Michael knows more about this than I did because he lived through it. But I think was missing. I think we also, the NHS made a mistake by picking the organisations whose IT was on fire and deciding to do those first because they had terrible problems. But if they'd not invested in technology for the previous 10 years and it was all a catastrophe, there's probably a reason for that. Whereas, so people, when the national programme kicked off, I was at the Royal Surrey, I said, we want to be a first wave adopter. And the message I got back was, no, there's nothing wrong with your IT, we'll come back to you in 3 years' time. And I suspect that happened all over the country, variations of the enthusiasts whose doctors wanted to be paperless, who wanted to be right at the leading edge of this, but oh, no, you've got to wait because we've got all of these systems that are going to fall over if we don't replace them in 3 months.
And it was, but also, I mean, he was given a horrible time in the press, wasn't he? There was a couple of MPs that used to chase him, the Daily Mail chased him. I remember he told me that his mother found what turned out to be a journalist going through her dustbin at her home. That was his mother, and his wife got completely hacked off with the thing at the end, and you know, broke his marriage up. Really, she went off to Australia, took the kids, and Richard stepped down.
They're demanding jobs.
Yeah, they are. They squeeze a lot out of people and their families as well. Yeah. So, okay, so you stepped in, and Sir John Patterson was around there, wasn't he? Was he there?
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah.
Not in my orbit. I think he was being really smart. Someone was he chief scientific officer?
Yeah, very influential guy. So anyway, so you what did you do then? What did you do? So David said,
have a look at this. So I did a review which basically said national programme in its current format isn't going anywhere. We need to make this set of changes to it. There's bits of it that will work. There's bits of it that have been a huge success, but we need to create a focus on what I think at the time I was calling the clinical 5, but 5 things that clinicians need to be able to get out of a system as a core to make it worthwhile.
Really? Can you remember what they are?
You need to be able to do e-prescribing. Prescribing, you need to be able to document your notes. You need to be able to get place lab orders and get lab results. You need to be able to document in outpatients, and you need to be able to see where every patient is. I think it was something like that. We hadn't got to the point there actually of which we would talk about a lot now of the need to therefore be able to link with GPs and community hospitals. The interoperability agenda wasn't anything like as high as it is now, but at that time it was. Because what had happened with the national programme is it basically become a PANS replacement programme, and so huge amount of upheaval, and what you got was a new system that was doing exactly the same as the old system, except that people have been using the old system for 15 years and they didn't understand how to use the new one. So everybody hated it, and we weren't delivering enough payback to go, you know what, I understand why you went through that pain.
Right, so, and then, at what point did you go to Cerner?
So I went from the Department of Health to a management consultancy firm.
That was Tribal, wasn't
Tribal, yes.
they became part of New Church, I think.
No, they bought New Church.
They bought New Church.
Yes, I bought Kingsley Manning.
Yeah. I'm sure he's delighted about that. Yeah.
It raised the dress sense in the organisation anyway.
Yeah.
And Kingsley, lots of people know Kingsley was fabulous to work with because he's so smart, so argumentative. We had a good time. But Tribal got bought by Capita, and that I didn't fancy very much. So, and about that time, I got a call from Cerner, and I'd only met them once when a small gang of us had gone across to Kansas City, their headquarters, to say what they were delivering through the national programme was completely unacceptable. And I remember. I
bet that was a news they welcomed.
Yeah, no, that went really well. I credit the founder, chief executive, Neil Patterson, died a couple of days ago from cancer, age 67. But he was a genuine innovator, built that company from nothing. And the first time I met him, we turned up in Kansas City. We got off a flight. There was 3 of us walked into a steak restaurant, and there was Neil and kind of his 3 lieutenants, and lovely restaurant, really nice wine. And before we go anywhere, I need to give you this. And I gave them the document that I'd been given by one of the hospitals that had been implementing the Cerner system, where they had. I'd asked them for a 1-page summary of the problems, and they give me 40 pages broken down line by line. I said, Neil, tomorrow we're going to want to talk about this, because I don't think this is what you came in the industry to deliver. He went, oh, right, okay, let's have dinner. And the following morning he came back and we went through it page by page, and he'd been through it and annotated it, and he brought the people from every team that was responsible for the bit and was saying, this is a scandal, why has nobody told me? And we went through I was relatively new to this time, and they started to explain that the hospital worked with an implementation team, and the implementation team worked with a prime contractor, and the prime contractor dealt with the Department of Health and the Department of Health, and it was like the path from a nurse in A&E can't make the system do what they want to anybody delivering back a new piece of software. And I would think it was 17 handoffs. Does that sound about right? Yes. Yeah. And the whole thing was brilliant. And he said, look, frankly, we have to deal with our users. You've got to find a way for my people to go and talk to the users. And they made a lot of changes to that. And then years and years passed, and then he rang me up and says, you remember when you shouted at me? He said, we need more of that. Yeah. Do you want to come around a global business? And I thought, that sounds like fun. And so I did, and it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. What did you do?
So I started off based in London, running Cerner's international business across 22 countries, and after a couple of years they asked me and the family to move out to Kansas City, joined the senior executive team and the board, and I ran not only the global business but also their population health management business. So all of the stuff that was to do with the Obama reforms, which was just riveting. So I worked with the Intermountains and the Geisingers and the Advocates and the Memorial Hermans, who were building the ACOs out there. And it was a specific decision that the board made, that they wanted somebody who had experience working in a public health system to come and help steer them through the Obama reforms, because they'd only ever grown up in fee-for-service and there was a mindset shift that they were struggling with. And so I spent 3 years working to create from scratch their population health platforms and the other.
And now it looks like it's all going to be unpicked. Well, it has been, isn't it?
If you have an insight into what President Trump's health strategy is, then I think there's a lot of people will be really interested
I
in
think
that.
it's easy to see how it works. You just flip a coin.
At the moment, it seems that most people in the American healthcare system kind of are assuming that the core of the argument, which is the cost of the American healthcare system, is unsustainable. The fragmentation we have in it, this all sounds very familiar, the fragmentation we have in it is driving cost. We need to get to the root cause of cost, which is the health of the population. Therefore, we need to create clinically integrated networks which manage geographic areas around capitated budgets. Doesn't go away under any circumstance, because all of the other ways of running health systems drive inflation into health. And what they have seen there in many areas now is that outcomes are going up and costs are going down for the first time in the history of the American healthcare system. So President Trump may, it still sounds odd, doesn't it? President Trump may reduce the access to healthcare that some people get, but the core of a business model that allows hospitals to be viable requires them to do population health management. And whilst they start from a different layer to us, they've learnt a lot over the last 3 or 4 years about how to manage populations.
The other thing I was interested in was I read that the vets no longer have to go to the vet hospital. They've now got a choice. They can go to any hospital, which I thought I couldn't quite work that out, because actually the Veterans Administration were doing a rather good job, I thought, when I saw it.
Yeah, they don't perceive that. They consider them to be bottom end, low quality public health. And I think for many VA hospitals that's unfair.
Yeah, I do too.
But that's it's considered to be a hospital of last resort in many cases.
But given what the alternatives were for a lot of people, it seemed to be a good option. Right. So so then you gave up running the world.
Yes.
And came back here.
Yes, I was looking for a harder job. Yes,
Then you got all muddled up with NHSE.
I came back to do this job for NHSE, which is, if you like, the Chief Operating Officer job. We don't call it that. We call it Operations and Information. Both words relatively straightforward.
No, it's beyond me to understand what the hell it is he's trying to do. Seems to me that you're running the NHS while Simon's off thinking about running the NHS.
Yeah, I don't think it feels like that. but my the only real condition I had over coming back was to bring information and the operational delivery together under a single leadership, because we've done some really innovative, interesting stuff around IT over the last few years, and under Tim Kelsey, really hard work going on around operations, but when you looked at them, the connectivity between the two was missing.
Well, exactly. I mean, Tim was good enough to come and be a guest, and he's,
I bet he had good socks in.
Yeah, he didn't have any socks in. He's a good guy. He's a great bass player, and he likes cricket, which makes him a good guy in my world. That's all it takes. But looking back on it, and I love him to death, but I can't remember anything he actually did.
Well,
sorry, Tim, if you're listening.
Yeah, Tim, yes, he'll be.
Can you sort of make a list of anything? What did he do?
No, I think Tim changed the mindset in quite a big.
Oh, right.
Because that's what he did. He communicated. He wasn't an engineer. He communicated. He communicated vision. And
when he got the job, I thought, what?
I think he is one of the leading thinkers in healthcare IT in the UK in the last 20 years. I think it's a logical place for him to have ended up. Was trying to do it, but he's not a big organisation making a bureaucracy tick kind of guy.
Well, he's doing it in Australia now, isn't he?
Well, yes, not quite the same, but yes, he's much more out on the policy strategy end than and they're delivering it on the ground.
Because he does, I mean, he does, sorry Tim if you're listening, we're only teasing you, you're a wonderful chap, and he's got debenture seats at Lord's, so it's worth saying. But,
I've not been to a test match since Tim left Dr. Foster. It's a nightmare.
really? I think you might like to come with us on Friday. Actually. This is the bit really I wanted to get to talk to you about, because okay, so we got the Department of Health that's just really faffing around their daft press office. Then we got the Jim Reaper, who sat in that chair, and we had a great night with him, and I'm a big fan of Jim Reaper, that everybody's terrified of, and you know, everything is focused on do not overspend, agree your controls totals, and deliver them, or you will take your firstborn and sell them to Adidas to make shoes or something. You know, I mean, it's all about the money, isn't it?
Well, it's not all about money.
Well, it is if you're running a bloody hospital.
Well, it shouldn't be, should it?
Well, but it is.
It shouldn't be. As in, it's not. It's really hard to run a hospital, but the exam question is not that hard. There is a chunk of money to deliver healthcare. The amount of money available is set by the government. You could disagree with them, or you could be politically sympathetic to them. But there is a chunk of money, and our job is to deliver the most healthcare that we possibly can for the money that's available.
Now that's a little subtle caveat, isn't it? The most healthcare we can. And the fact is, when you get CCGs that say, actually, we can't deliver all the healthcare we want to do, we're going to rein back.
You can have an NHS of any size that you want. The question is what you're prepared to pay for.
Well, it's shrinking, isn't it?
Well, it's not.
I mean, David Nicholson talks about it ending up a poor service for poor people.
Well, maybe he does, right? But that's not where we
are.
What are we?
6.3% of GDP, where previously we were about 8.7.
We have a bit of a problem over what the number is on GDP since the OECD changed how they calculated it. But your principle is right. We've gone back to about where we were before there was the investment. So it's gone up and it's gone back down again.
We've gone back to the year 2000.
And we've ended up with services which are better than they were when the investment started. So the NHS has delivered a shed load of productivity, improved quality, shorter waiting times through that.
What's the productivity figure? It's anything from 0.2% to 1.2%. Depends who you're talking to. What is the annual improvement in productivity in the NHS?
Over the last couple of years, nearer to 2%.
Well, how near?
2 point something, but that's not.
It's not over 2%.
You look what's happened over the last couple of years. Look at the squeeze that the NHS has taken since really since the 2010 election, where we've had about 1% real growth over that period of time. We know that the underlying cost growth of the NHS since its foundation is nearer to 3.5%. We've had some degradation in services, but we're nowhere near back to where we were. So somewhere in that 2.5% difference between what natural inflation is and what funding has been the productivity of the NHS.
Well, the 10 to 15 period, which is the last funding cycle,
for around 6%.
Well, yes. I mean, I wrote a report about.
Oh, sorry, 10 to 15.
I wrote a report, Healthcare in London, and we thought the growth in demand in London was 7%. It's very desi, rightly so. I mean,
core underlying population demographic growth is about 1.5%.
Yeah.
Then you have a set of costs that are created by we can do new things. But if you look at the impact of ageing of the population and increasing sickness, somewhere between 1.5% is a standstill figure if you don't do anything new.
Yeah.
And we have done new stuff as well. So my core point.
I want to take you back to what was effectively the so-called Nicholson challenge, wasn't it? It was 20 billion hole in the finances, which we claim that we made up.
Yeah.
Well, we did that by not giving staff a pay rise. We did that by taking a chunk of money out of the tariff, and we did that by doing deals here and there with the pharmaceutical industry. I don't think we did it in enormous productivity, did we?
Well, so that's true, except that taking money out of the tariff doesn't actually take any cost out.
So it's just you do more work for less money.
what's your definition of productivity other than doing more work for less money?
Well, that's it. But I mean,
So we must have therefore done productivity if we did more work for less money.
I think yes, but I think well, okay. I mean, the productivity. I think the general definition of productivity would be, you know, we all get better at what we do, and you know, we do more innovative things and all the rest of it. As it is, what have we got? We've got 300,000 people on the waiting list.
Well, I think the general definition of productivity is more work for less money. But
well, I'm not arguing with that, but we've run up a huge waiting list.
So
now.
waiting lists have gone up, but we are still delivering waiting times which are exceptional by global standards. They're going in the wrong direction. There's a real worry. I have a real worry that if we continue doing what we're doing, we will end up with a waiting list that looks like it would. But we have still got the vast majority of people being seen within 18 weeks. We still have relatively small numbers and reducing numbers of people waiting over 52 weeks. And when we came into this cycle on about the same level funding levels as we are now in real terms, we have people waiting a year and a half. I think that's an improvement, and I think that's credit to the NHS. I think dissing the NHS and suggesting that it's just as crap as it ever was, I think is not doing a fair job to a million people who I think are making a phenomenal
No, I think
amount of
that's
change.
just sort of bully boy bollocks myself. I don't agree with any of that. I
Because people aren't doing a good job, that waiting lists are 18 months.
Shut up, I'll tell you. When you look at the overall of how the NHS is functioning, clearly it is struggling. Now, I wrote a piece last week, I don't know if you read the stuff that I write, but I actually said the NHS is actually doing a very good job because we are missing targets, we're missing them by margins, by small margins. But nevertheless, you've got you saying, well, you know, we're doing a great job because we're missing the targets by small margins, and then you've got the apparatchiks in the NHS who go around giving trusts and others a hell of a time for not hitting the targets and making life miserable for people who don't hit targets. And then, well, so, I mean, are targets important or not?
So targets are important. We now have, compared to the panoply of targets we had previously, we have a relatively small number of targets. I think if you're going to spend £120 billion worth of taxpayers' money, you have a right to ask for a small number of things back for that. So I think targets are important. I think people waiting in A&E is important. I think people waiting for their cancer diagnosis and treatment is important. I think people waiting for access to mental health services is important. I think people waiting for access to their GP is important. So somehow within this we have to set some priorities, which is what we're trying to do. It is very tough. We need to do some of the changes that we believe are beginning to emerge out of the conversations going on in the SDPs and the ACSs. But we are...
Matthew, let's come back to reality. We've got people who've got cancer and we're missing their targets.
Yes, we have.
Well, what are you going to do?
And I was trying to explain to you that there is no question the NHS is under enormous financial pressure. There's two choices. Either we declare, as you want, targets aren't important, and you don't get targets.
I haven't said they are important. I'm trying to decide what you're saying, because on the one hand you're saying they are important, on the other hand you're saying we're only missing them by a small margin. Listen, it might be a small margin, but if you've got cancer, it's a bloody big margin.
I think as you were making the point that it's a small margin, but we are focused on hitting the cancer targets, not on missing them by a small target, but by a small amount. But to do that, our hypothesis is that we have pretty much pushed the challenge of what you can do in silos to its limit. This requires health systems to come together and say, we are creating ourselves a problem here through the handoffs, through the way in which PVR operates, through I don't want to do this because, although this might be the right thing to do, I take a cost hit on it and I'm under pressure to balance my budget, so I'm creating more net cost to the system because it's the right thing to do for my organisation. We're trying to give permission to say, we'll have the grown-up conversation and say, if the whole of the system can get better, then we can give permission for a deficit here to be offset by a surplus there. Trying to get health system, in the absence of new legislation, in the absence of a big bucket full of money, then trying to get the NHS to have the permissions to solve things for itself, focused on, you still have to deliver this stuff, so June is saying you have to balance the budgets, we're saying you have to balance the budget, you have to hit the targets, we're saying that, and Jim is saying that, but let's find better ways to do it, and there's still some easy stuff, the Packard stuff, which we're not doing because it challenges historic working practices. And so when we get to the point between hitting the cancer target and changing working practices, we need to change the working practices, not explain why we missed the cancer target. So it's really difficult out there at the moment, but our obligation is to do it as well as it possibly can be done. And I don't think there's a single chief executive in the NHS who would say that their organisation is 100% efficient. My organisation wasn't 100% efficient when I left it, and it had the 4th lowest reference costs in the country. And I could still see where the next batch of savings were going to come from. So organisations need to be able to work together, and that's what we're seeing begin to happen. It's really hard. These are difficult decisions. Some of them we need more time. Some of them would be really nice if we had some money to help facilitate the change. But all the money is out there funding the service at the moment, so we don't have the big pots we had. The degree of difficulty is way up there now. As any chief executive who's been around through this many times would say, this is probably as hard as they can remember. But we still have one of the most efficient health services in the world, delivering extraordinary performance and not having let it slide back to where it was the last time we funded
was Jim right when he said that if it's good enough, it's good enough?
In what context did he say if it's good enough?
Well, he was saying that, I think he said it last winter, didn't he, about busting your gut to hit targets and whatever. He said sometimes you just have to accept the fact it's good enough.
Well, I think good enough is where the targets are. We're not going to hit, so pick another number, how long future people should wait for cancer treatment, how long people should wait for A&E.
Well, I mean,
that's not the debate. The real debate is...
there's a discussion, isn't there, if you look at A&E targets, for example. There's no question about it. When the A&E targets came in, everybody had a connected fit.
Yep.
They thought, how the hell are we going to do this? And as we were saying earlier, it gave rise to a greater understanding of flow and reorganisation and putting your best people on the front line and all this stuff, and all the stuff now that we know works. But you get to the point where you say, well, actually, someone comes in with some minor thing wrong with them. Are we going to bust a gut to do 4 hours? Isn't there a case for going back on the crude target of time and having much more of a clinical decision making around who gets done and seen and what have you? I mean, what is the benefit of having a 4-hour target?
So I think there's a very fair point in there somewhere. Part of it is that at the core of what we do needs to come a safety decision, and chasing this person's 4-hour target to put a bandage on compared to this person who needs to have their heart attack dealt with immediately. No clinician is going to decide to chase the bandage, and we shouldn't be encouraging them to. What we're asking is for both. Now, what we're doing to A&Es at the moment is providing large volumes of care for people who shouldn't be in A&E departments.
Yes. Can I just interrupt you there? Because I was at the Royal Birmingham, Liverpool Royal a couple of days ago, and they've got a frailty pathway, which it's not unique, but it's clever. And so when the archetypal little old lady, which the NHS will forever be measured against, turns up in A&E, she's seen by a geriatrician. The entire pathway. It's in the same building, but it could be another building. The whole pathway is redefined around the definition of that patient.
Yes.
Now, it seems to me, rather than hounding trusts to see everybody within 3 hours and 59 minutes and 60 or 59 seconds, whatever it is, we ought to be hounding them on the redesign side. And there's such a lot of fantastic stuff that I see when I go around. I'm sure you do too. You see how things have been redesigned, and then you go to other hospitals and you see this has not been redesigned at all.
I completely agree, and that was my very point about when we hit the targets last time round. Some places with fundamental redesign, and some places just got bigger, and the ones that just got bigger have run out of space again. But the ones that did fundamental redesign are coping better with this pressure. So I'd say it's both, that you can't do the 4-hour target if you don't make big changes in the community to keep people away from A&E who don't need to be there, and big changes inside the hospital to get people through. Where I was in Guildford, where the GPs are sensational, we kind of had this moment where, why is every patient who has already spoken to their GP and told to come to A&E being reassessed by a trainee? They've spoken to an experienced doctor who said you need to be in the hospital. Now we're getting them to speak to a student to say, yeah, the GP was right. Can we not bypass that piece and get them straight to a physician to make a judgment on admission or not? That was another piece of redesigning the pathway. Now, some parts of the country don't have that density of high calibre GPs able to offer it, so that wouldn't work everywhere. But for places where your GPs look like that, you can take advantage of it. So the redesign of pathways around individual patients, absolutely right. The standardisation on what you've written about standardisation recently, and kind of a little sarky about it, but I think there is a core model which says for 80% of patients under a certain condition, there is a treatment pathway for them, and we should deliver that flawlessly for every patient.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll take the criticism on the chin, because quite often I'll take a line in what I write to promote a discussion like this. I mean, I was in another hospital recently. I won't tell you which hospital it was, but I was with the board, and they were worried about getting people out, and they said, you know, what have you seen around that we could do, and all this, you know, and they were doing most of what they could. They had a pretty difficult local government to deal with.
Yeah.
So I said, well, let's have a look at what's coming in. Let's analyse what's coming in. And so they ran the numbers, and we looked at the postcodes, and most of the frequent flyers through A&E were coming in through, I think it was 4 GP practices and 2 care homes. And it wasn't rocket science to send some matrons from the hospital out to sort it out. And now I think last time I heard that they've sorted it out. But so the point I'm moving towards, sorry to be so tedious about it, but and I know that you are doing some work on this, and I'd like to talk about that. And that is the obvious contradiction that there is between NHSE and NHSI. You know, the back office and burden and cost just seems to me to be balmy, because you're both in pursuit now of an integrated NHS, where having an artificial demarcation between effectively your line, primary care, and Jim's line, hospital, says to me, why don't we just have one organisation that's regulating, chivying them up, looking after them, encourage them? You know, do we need 2 organisations now?
Well, obviously we have an infrastructure in the NHS which is perfectly designed to optimise the benefit that the centre adds to the service in the field.
We might have to give some thought to that.
and
thank you, Confucius.
Yeah. Well, as Simon said in Parliament, if you hold it to be true that it makes sense, it makes it easier to do what it does. But
he is cheeky to Parliament, isn't he? I love the way he gets away with it.
Well, he gets called in so often now.
Yeah.
Which I don't remember this being custom practice in the past, but he now gets called in so often that it's not like a visit to the Health Select Committee or to the PAC. It's more like the continuation of a conversation that that's been going on. So they kind of know each other. But and I think he represents the NHS very well there. But I think the point you're making is a fair one. But
But you just merged, haven't you? Just what I want to get to is a lot of people in the audience won't know about this. You've actually now got in 2 areas where you've got NHSE and NHSI working together. So tell us about that, because I think that's interesting.
So we've done a number of things. The first thing that we did was for urgent and emergency care, we split the country up amongst the regional directors across IND. So the 8 regional directors, we split the country up between them. And so if you go to the West Midlands, Dale, who is the regional director for the West Midlands for NHSI, speaks on behalf of NHS England when he's trying to sort out urgent emergency care. And if you go to East Anglia, Paul Watson speaks on behalf of NHSI, even though he's my regional director in NHS England. So first of all, across urgent emergency care, we want one voice across both parts, and that's gone really, really well. We've then started to make some joint appointments. We now have 2 of the regions that have got a joint director of nursing. We've started to get the regional directors travelling together, and then, as you say, most recently we announced that for the South East and the South West, we split the South region into 2 because it's a very large patch. And then for the South East and South West, we are in the process. So from the 1st of September, there will be a regional director for the South West, Jennifer Howells, who will represent both NHSI and NHSE, and in the process of organising the two teams underneath there, and for the South East, Annie Eden, who is currently NHSI's regional director for the whole of the South, will be NHSI and NHSE's regional director for the South East. So she'll report to both me and to Jim Mackey, which will be a particular joy for the two of them.
Annie is very good.
Yes, I know. She used to work for me.
Yeah, she worked. Yeah, she did. She worked at home, and she was a stunning star. Even then, went on to run a hospital, and now she's with you. And is that a precursor, do you think, to working closer together at the top end?
So we now meet as a joint management team on a regular basis. I think the proportion of my time and Simon's time that we spend making sure that we are aligned is very significant now. I think everyone wants to see how South East South West goes, and can we prove the benefits from that as we are with urgent and emergency care, and increasingly with the STPs that we're starting to line up. Each STP has got a region that they talk to. So we have a set of statutory responsibilities in the same way as monitoring TDA.
I was just going to say to you exactly that. I mean, Simon did a very clever sleight of hand with Monitor and the TDA, and we ended up with NHSI. You know, where the hell did that come from? And we've all thought, you know, we all now think, well, it was always NHSI. Actually, it wasn't NHSI. It's just some kind of vaporware thing, isn't it, really? There's two statutory organisations underneath that, when you're carrying out the statutory duties. Can we expect a similar sleight of hand?
We don't sleight of hand, we do transparency and engagement.
We could have NHSU, NHS us, to get rid of NHSI and E.
But we would rapidly be known as NHS them.
Them and us, you understand? Okay, let's talk about staffing, because one of the big problems now, of course, that we've got, I mean, I'm not sure this is really in your bailiwick, but I mean, it does seem to me that everybody's wringing their hands and thinking, well, what the hell are we going to do? And it's a fundamental part of delivery, and I accept absolutely this is not really your bag, but I mean it is so important. I mean, it depends who you believe and who you read and who you talk to, but we could be 30, 40, 50, and there's rumours that Health Education England is sitting on a report predicting a 60,000 shortage of nurses within the foreseeable future. We've got a huge proportion of the nursing workforce approaching or at retirement age. We've got the whole palaver that Brexit has now pronounced upon us, not only in terms of EU nationals being disincentivised to wanting to be here, and new people coming, and now, of course, this business about reducing migration numbers in the net, which is making it difficult. I mean, what is your sense that there is real concern about the future of the workforce?
There's real concern about the future of the workforce, and I think there's a whole host of things that we need to do if we want to be self-sufficient in workforce, be it doctors or nurses or allied professionals. Then we need to train a lot more people. But there is a pipeline to that, and there's a gap to the ramping up of it.
Is it really feasible? I mean, if you discount the bursary, the impact of the bursary, I mean, and I know the RCN, will say this is a very significant thing, but we used to have 5 applications for every 1 training post. Then the bursary thing came in, and now it's apparently 3 to every 1. And the dropout rate is the attrition rate on the nursing course is quite high. Apparently, it's about 20%. Some people say, I don't know. But if you think about it, it takes 3 years to train a nurse. The supply from Europe has pretty much been cut off now. We come out of Europe in 24 months, and it takes 36 months to train a nurse. I mean, already we're in a mess, and I don't see any attempt really to ramp up nurse training other than taking away the bursary.
So I think we need to ramp up training, and I think there are attempts to ramp up training for both nurses and doctors. But we also need to get a message out that EU doctors and nurses who are in the NHS are going to be welcome to stay. And I think there is just a message that we need to get out to to people that
well, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but we may not be able to negotiate terms which are satisfactory for them and their families. So it's not, I don't think it's a given that we can just say, yes, we'll do a deal on doctors and nurses and let them stay, because it's not as easy as that, is it? Because there are family considerations. And,
well, if we're arguing that historically, as we do because it's true, historically the NHS has not trained enough people to fill all of its posts.
So we brought them in from the Far East?
Well, I think 30% of NHS clinicians were trained
with Friendly Park.
We're trained overseas. So that's historically that's been the strategy. You can change the strategy and say we don't want to have 30% trained overseas, we only want 2% to be trained overseas, but you therefore need to increase by 50% the number of people you're training. So you need to get that maths right and be trained in the right numbers. We need to be clear to our overseas workforce who carry an enormous burden and are fully embedded in the NHS that they are welcome here and they don't need to be planning to go home. And if you take a job over here, that we will honour that. But we also need...
Well, some have gone. I was in Portugal.
No, it's no question.
I was in Portugal 4 weeks ago now, and I was at a hospital in Portugal. And I met some nurses. Well, they're not. This is their problem. They were working here. They were concerned, so they went home. The state of the Portuguese economy is now that they can't recruit the number of nurses they really want. So now we've got the ludicrous prospect of a whole load of Portuguese nurses are unemployed.
Yeah. So that may well be true, and we do need to have a comprehensive strategy. But the other thing we need to do is focus on the workforce that we've got. Our attrition rate, our turnover rate is much too high. We need to improve retention.
Yeah, did you see that? 52% of the nurses that leave are our own homegrown nurses.
I didn't see that, but I believe if you say it's true. But because we have both across our medical and our clinical professions, we could make a big difference if we made staying more attractive. So we need to look at what is it that we're doing to people which is making it easier to go elsewhere, making people want to go elsewhere, or want to drop off and do agency work rather.
Well, you can understand it, can't you? I mean, nurses now do pretty standard 3-hour, 12-hour shifts back to back, and then to make up their money, they do a couple of shifts in a nursing home the other 2 days. I mean, it's a hell of a job on the front line.
So workforce is a huge challenge for us. I would say potentially it's our single biggest challenge.
Whose job is it to do workforce? Is it NHS England? Is it NHSI, who are the regulators for the hospitals? Or is it Health Education England? Who does it now?
Health Education England with us, but the lead on it is with Health Education England.
But their last report was really not very. I mean, I don't want to be rude about it. Why should I? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought it was a load of crap. Their last report. I mean, it was just horrendously poor. I mean, it just lacked any insight as to the real, car crash it's going to be. But I'm not sure they can deal with it, to be honest. I mean, they were dealt a bad hand anyway when they started up. They had their budget cut immediately and then had it budget cut again. I'm not sure, what can they do?
Well, we have to have a workforce plan that is addressing how we're training people, where we're getting the gap from, and how we retain the people we've got, and if we don't do that. But we also need to ask the other question, which is what does the workforce need to look like in the future? I mean, I would argue that we're in the process of hiring more GPs because we undoubtedly need more GPs. We will then need more GPs. We will then need more GPs. We will then need more GPs. At some point, we have to say the model under which we deliver primary care needs to be less GP dependent and more GP led. When I was hospital chief executive, I appointed an orthopaedic surgeon. I knew it came with the costs of the pyramid that went with that. The trainees, the nurses in clinic, the access to beds, the theatre time. It was about £1 million to have an orthopaedic surgeon start, and that wasn't just their salary. We need to get that mindset for GPs, that when you're recruiting a GP, you're not recruiting a GP, you're recruiting a team led by a GP that can make a difference to health. And then you start to ask a different question about what's the skills mix that we need, and how are we training the right sorts of people, and how do we get people working at the top of their licence and those things. And I think we're a bit missing on that piece of the analysis.
That's the very valuable chunk, if we go back to talk about STPs for a minute. I mean, I've read quite a lot of these STP reports, their plans, as we've made. I mean, they've made a real horlicks of the communication strategy, most of them, and sighted communities when they really should have taken them along with them. But so many of them say, oh yes, and we're going to transfer, I don't know, 300 beds, into the community, and we're going to look after the throughput of 300 beds in the community. Well, the average bed stay, let's say, is 5 days. Let's say it's 8 days for an older person. If we talk about a medical bed, 3 8 to 24, that's 24,000 people, we're going to look after in the community, and the doctors are going to do it. Really? I don't think so.
So I think that's the challenge of almost one by one I've been giving to the STPs when I've been meeting with them, is what is your model to allow that shift to happen? I think everybody agrees that a hospital-focused service that we have at the moment needs to shift to being a community-focused service. But what's the algorithm? What is the conversion of 300 geriatric beds into GPs, district nurses, facilities, MRI scanners? What does that look like when you start to create community hubs in primary care? What is the staffing model of that in order to do the shift? Because the reason that a lot of these things fail, I think, is that we don't do it at a big enough scale. So you can't deliver the cost shift if you move 10 beds out of the medical unit. It's really good for the 10 people, but it doesn't actually create that. So I think you're absolutely right. We have to be able to work through. We also need to
Can I just stop you there?
I'll
I'll let you carry on a bit, because it is interesting that you recognise that that's a problem. But the difficulty is the STPs are under pressure to deliver this now. And if you look at district nurses, I mean, I think I read somewhere that last year in London we trained 5 new district nurses. It's bizarre. There just is not the staff in the community to get anywhere near this. Well, take, for example, the last couple of days of hot weather, right? Mm-hmm. You've probably seen the data. The UTIs have gone up on the 3rd day. The admissions go up after 2 days of hot weather. Now, you can say, well, actually, we could have stopped that happening in the community. We could have knocked on all these people's doors, and we could have done an at-risk register. And I think we've got at-risk registers now. Some GPs have done it. We knocked on the door and say, "Are you drinking enough, love? You're all right." Sure, we could have stopped the admissions, but who the hell's going to do it?
So it's absolutely the right challenge. That is the challenge that we have to work through. I think when you read the STP plans, you need to remember that these were multi-year plans. So when you talk about closing 300 beds, mostly you're not talking about closing 300 beds. I'd be really surprised if the NHS in 5 years' time has significantly fewer beds than it's got at the moment.
It needs more beds.
The skill, the trick to pull off, is to cope with the growing demand within the bed capacity we've got at the moment by moving people who are currently in hospital beds to being cared for in other places so that hospital beds can be used more effectively.
But it's cost, isn't it? When you say about hospital beds, right, if you just ignore for a moment the acuity argument about 1% of muscle loss a week or day or whatever it is, if you just look at the cost, why is a hospital bed costed at £300 a night plus, and I can get a room in a Premier Inn for 57 quid?
Yeah, but they won't come and give you a bed bath for that.
No, that's the bed price.
No, it's not. That's the cost of having somebody in hospital.
Well, then how are you staffing it? Because we haven't got a clue what safe staffing is. How are you going to staff it?
That's not
1 to 8. Yeah, come on.
But the point being...
Don't we do the accounting differently? We could account for the costs in hospital a lot differently, couldn't we? Well, you run a hospital, you know you can make the cost of a bed what you like.
But you can't make the cost change. You can move the costs around, apportion overheads and stuff, but in the end, it costs what it's costing to run a hospital. You can run it more efficiently and lower the cost.
But if you look after,
changing the accounting
change the cost. If you look after somebody, you move it somewhere else. But if you look after somebody at home, what have you got? You've got a rising service. You've got Meals on Wheels. You've got bathing. You've got chiropody, tissue viability, prescribing. I mean, you've got 5 or 6 people that are going to turn up and knock on the door.
Well, so nice did a report on this only a couple of years, 18 months ago, which said effectively that the cost of managing somebody in the community somewhere between £50 and £100 a day, and the cost of managing the same person in hospital between £200 and £300 a day. So there is a cost saving there.
But how can that be? Hang on, that doesn't make...
You need to ask
it doesn't make any... No, but I mean, in common sense terms, what did you say, 100 quid a day to look after somebody in the community? well, what is the price of a district nurse and a tissue viability nurse and all the other experts that it takes to look after? You can't buy that for 100 quid. I mean, just common sense tells you it's more than 100 quid.
Well,
and you've got the management costs, and you've got the costs in flow, and you've got travel. I mean, it can't be right, can it?
The analysis that people have done this at scale, says it costs about 40% to manage people in the community that it costs to manage in hospital if you do it at scale, but if you do it in small numbers, it costs more because it's just an ad. So the challenge is...
I don't buy the scale argument at all. I think the economies of scale might be in the management of the services, but there aren't any economies of scale. You've still got to go and drive, park the car, get out, go in, knock on the door, give somebody a bath and come out. There's no economies of scale at that.
There's economies of scale at having whole jobs for the professionals that you need in order to... But
we could change the birds on.
So the point being, though, that if you want to manage people in the community, and I would argue that the holding of people on elderly care wards who don't need to be there is actually is a significant service failure. We are depriving people of their liberty.
You accept that? No, he's not. He's
Right.
not either, because a lot of people quite like being in hospital. A few people around they can talk to. I don't buy that.
No,
but I do buy the fact that it's probably better to look after somebody in their own home. I mean, let's not think of hospitals as banging people up, but looking after people in their own homes. We're all in favour of that. What I'm simply saying to you is, I don't see there's anything in Health Education England's planning or any of the STP planning that in any way reassures me that an STP area can suddenly look after 28,000 people more in the community when you can't ring up and get an appointment with your GP for a fortnight.
So I think both of those are the right questions to ask. The point I was making is not about doing this in a year.
Would you like to answer?
You
Feel free.
Feel free to keep talking. So what we require over the 5-year plans, which is what those plans are covering, because a lot of those are about bids, we would have to open the COVID demand with the current model.
Can I ask you the 5 years? Is it 5 years? Or is it 2020? Or they go up to 2023? It's quite important, isn't it? Is it the life of the Parliament? Or do the...
Well, it's not the life of the Parliament, because the life of the Parliament has changed since the STP.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. So will it supplant the 5 year? I mean, the winter clock runs about 120 weeks left, isn't it, to 2020?
Probably, yes. But the point is that these were longer term plans. They weren't just about this year. And the challenge we're asking for NHS managers is the stuff that has to happen straight away because you have real issues that we have to deal with today. The stuff you need to be doing today to get ready for next year, and there's things we need to be doing today which puts in train the work, the things that will make in 5 years' time possible. And that's the real challenge that managers face at the moment, is to be able to both deal with the immediate challenge and be taking the action for the future.
I'm going to stop you, if I may, because I've suddenly realised I'm running out of time. You're so interesting to talk to. Thank you, Matthew. A very interesting guest. I'm going to have to leave that thought hanging because I want to talk to you a little bit about, well, first of all, have we got some questions on Twitter?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, hold those for a moment. I just wondered, you wrote something just recently when you were talking about the innovation, the use of technology and all the rest of it. Have we not really got to the point now where there will be a whole cadre of middle-class people who will just get fed up with primary care and they'll do a Babylon subscription or they'll do a GoDoc subscription? Yeah, and they'll just abandon trying to get some kind of an appointment with a GP in a fortnight's time. Are we going to be led really by, well, be overtaken, I think, by the generalised use of technology where we're still, you still can't do a FaceTime with a GP unless it's, there's some, palaver around it. It's sharing of data and the call-the-cop thing still doesn't really enable the free flow of data in the way that we really want it to. We've had so many of our big brains trying to deal with this. I mean, we've still got apps on mobile phones, whereas if you're a diabetic, you can manage your diabetes, but then you can't send the data anywhere. We've got no call centres that you can send this stuff to. I mean, I just think of it, all this digital stuff as like I read their report, their annual report was out. I read it today, and I thought, you know what, this is not really very something.
So the challenge is exactly the right one. I think the good news is that there is a whole load of work going on at the moment to try and create a version of the NHS, which is the one you described. So, so I talk about, I've talked quite a lot about 111 and changing the model of 111, so it's less about triaging you to where you should go next, and more about a consultant complete.
It needs more clinicians in the front line. It's
So,
obvious.
so it needs more clinicians in the front line. I enjoyed your reference to John Seddon. We to see what John Seddon would do with one of our 111 call centres.
We'll ask him, yes. Failure demand. He'll come and
failure
rip the place apart.
So, but what we do know is that if more people get to talk to clinicians, then fewer of you get handed off to GPs or handed off to A&E. But if you really look at what 111 needs to be able to do, to be able to do a consultation with someone who rings in, it does need, if you're ringing in with a rash, to be able to see a picture of the rash. It needs you to be able to send information to. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, but you haven't got to send it at the moment, so you need to be able to handle that. And you want the person who's on the other end of the phone, if you're talking to a GP on the other end of the phone, to actually be able to say, and what you need is some antibiotics, and I've done you a prescription, which is where are you? You can go and pick it up from books, and then you start the other. Because if that telephone conversation ends up with, I think you're going to need antibiotics, and to do that, you either need to go to A&E or your GP.
It's completely blown it.
You completely blown. So all of that work is in progress.
When are we going to see the fruits of that work?
Over the
And
next
whose feet do we have to hold to the fire to make that happen?
Well, you can feel
Name the person.
Feel free to hold my feet to the fire.
Okay.
Cause
You got the wrong socks.
I've got the wrong socks on. Yeah, I've got flame-proof socks, and we'll be all right. But we've got a brilliant team now working on that, led by a woman called Juliet Bauer, who has come into the NHS.
Yes, what's her background? I read about it. She's quite an interesting person.
She's very interesting. Yeah, she's had a series of roles in the private sector, delivering including leading the project that took Times Online. So she gets this stuff, and her experience. She came to us and said, "Do you want me to come and help you sort this out?" Because she'd been using health services and was appalled about how hard it was to get to her data, how little digitisation there was, and so she comes with that real consumer passion for it, and she keeps challenging the. You need to stop designing from a provider point of view and start designing around a consumer point of view. So we have that challenge in place. We're working with NHS Digital, big progress there about what that needs to look like. It's a big challenge, but I think we have the potential to get ahead of the world in this over the next couple of years.
I went up and I did a visit to them in Leeds, and I tell you, there's a lot going on you don't know about, particularly the security aspects of what goes on. Do you know we get more emails than the Pentagon in a day? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an astonishing thing.
Yeah, we should. I mean, NHS Digital runs the NHS infrastructure brilliantly. The reason no one talks about it is because it tends to not fall over.
Well, it's also very sneaky beaky to get in and see it. Right, I'm running out of time now, so Jerry, what have we got?
Well, there's 3 key themes on Twitter, if I could pick up. I'll start Twitter questions. So people are asking about, okay, the 90% bed occupancy that they're aiming for. Some people are saying, okay, but that would be, in my establishment, 110 empty beds, which means no waiting time, but I can't afford to do that. Well, what's the workaround?
Well, NHS Improvement's target number is 92%. Getting to the workaround is fewer delayed discharges. So working with the continuing healthcare and social care to get people out of the beds who shouldn't be there. It's taking, you're not going to release 10% of your beds there, taking 10% off the length of stay of the average patient. I mean, it's hard stuff, but the yards are there to do it. It's moving people.
There are places that do it. Where did we go? We went somewhere other. They had the social services people on their wards.
In the
hospital was
that? I think it was up in Aintree.
Aintree, yeah.
If you go to Bradford, you'll find they've got a team of people sitting in a room on computers, on telephones, effectively managing several wards worth of hospital of the hospital out in the community.
There are ways to do it, and it's sharing best practice that we just hope is that. Right, what else you got?
Okay, the second theme, which is quite superficial, but many people want to know what David Nicholson's office wallpaper was like when you were there. Sorry, but I'm asking the question.
It's cream, wasn't it?
You can't
possibly remember.
Okay, sorry.
It's cream paint. If you're listening, David. So.
And this one, which is probably contentious, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Could you clarify the potential 30% cut to NHS admin funding? Apparently, the staff aren't allowed to know this.
Well, it says in the 5-year.
It's in private eye, I think.
It's in the 5-year forward next steps. The requirement for us to deliver a set of cost savings, which will release more money back.
Is there a case of moving Health Education England into NHSI?
Maybe. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, frankly, I'm more interested in what needs to be delivered in the NHS in order to make change than I am in kind of moving the deck chairs around.
Anything else? Anybody else? Anybody got anything here they want to ask? Don't go home saying, "I wish I'd asked that. Didn't get a chance." Okay. Yes, sir. Would you stand up and give us a lungful so we can pick it up on the sound?
Hi. My name is Steve Black. Just a couple of themes coming out of
Be quick.
what you've been saying. I'll be very quick. One is one of the biggest problems in the NHS. There've been a couple of articles on this recently. Royal College of Surgeons and Health Service Journal published a thing this week saying hospitals that have more managers have higher quality and lower costs. But one of the themes we've got is actually we want to cut the number of managers across the NHS because politically it's far better to recruit doctors than it is to recruit managers. But if the productivity of the medical profession is limited because they haven't got enough support staff or the system hasn't got enough good people to set the management processes and design the systems, why aren't we saying recruit more managers? Because that will give us better organised systems and you'll get better flow in the system and you'll get better performance. Well,
because the Daily Mail will go potty if they think we've hired another manager.
So we'd rather kill patients than, or rather, get good headlines in Daily Mail than kill patients.
I wouldn't put it quite like that, but the Daily Mail does run the country.
Yeah. But management costs in the NHS are very low, even by publicly funded health systems.
It's £1 for every 100 is spent on running it.
So I'm not arguing for fewer managers in hospitals. I'm sure the Daily Mail is. I haven't heard Jim Mackey demanding that either. I think sometimes we're over-administered and under-managed, and what we need is more leaders to stand up and do difficult change, and fewer people processing some of the things that, frankly, we have invented, which then require people to then do processing. I would rather have more leaders talking about change and fewer leaders talking about invoice reconciliation. But so I think that, but I take your point. I think good management makes it possible to practice good medicine, and the only purpose of being a manager in the NHS is to say, are we optimising care for our community, and are we making it possible for our highly skilled professionals to do the thing that we employ them to do?
Good managers create the time and space for good people to do great things.
Exactly.
And thank you, sir. You can sit down now. Look, I could sit talking for another half an hour, but I know you've got
You need to go say goodbye to Mike Richards.
Yes, I won't say anything about that, and you're welcome to that. All I can say is I just wish you'd have come a lot earlier. But anyway, so thank you. You've been a fantastic guest. Wasn't you been a great guest? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I got my arse stuck in the chair. Listen, we have a little tradition. We always.
So that was absolute box office. For those of you who've been to we've never had anything as good as that before.
And all
with
caught
Roy
on
getting
film.
caught in his chair.
If he landed on his nose, it would have been fantastic.
I got this thing caught in the top of the thing. Anyway, never mind. Listen, we have a little tradition here. We always give our guests a special bottle of whiskey, which for those of you who are new to Health Chats is actually Welsh whiskey. Could you believe it? Which is the best whiskey in the world. I'll broke no argument from Scotsmen who know nothing about whiskey. Welsh whiskey is the best whiskey in the world. I hope you enjoy that. We also do it because it is quite expensive, and it's just over the limit where you have to declare it to the department. I just love the idea of coming in. Anyway, you've been a great guest. Thank you very much.